Hello, everybody. Welcome to the SSI talk. My name is Marina Steagal. For those who don't know me, I am now a member of the SSI. I was living before in San Diego and Amsterdam, and now I'm here with the Dublin team. So today we're going to talk about the law of cause and effect. And I'm going to share a few slides today. And I hope that we get some engagement in the comments so we can have a little bit of a conversation about this. So starting on, the law of cause and effect is something that we talk a lot about, and we're going to use two readings today. So there's a book from André Luiz called Action and Reaction. It's this book. And we're going to talk about heaven and hell, the same book from Kardec that Vanderlei talked about last week, because they both touch on the laws of karma, what happens after this life. Is there such thing as eternal punishment? So we're going to have a little bit of a conversation on that. The word karma, starting with definition. So the word karma is a word that we use all the time. It comes from the Sanskrit and means action. So every movement derives from a previous cause and impulse. Okay, so that's something that we use commonly. We talk about it all the time. And here is a picture of a boomerang, because something that we throw, once we put something in action, it would eventually come back to us, okay? But there are two things that I wanted to talk about today, so let's see if we can accomplish this goal. First of all, I want to talk about the difference between the laws of karma or the laws of cause and effect with action and reaction. And the second one is to talk about the influence of our willpower. And how much do we have, our will, our free will versus determinism. So let's see if we can accomplish that today. Okay. So action and reaction is an automated mechanic physical law, Newtonian law. Every time you throw something, it's going to come back to you. So if you get a ball, you throw it at a wall, it's going to come back. You throw it again, it comes back. You throw it stronger, it comes back stronger. So it's just action, reaction, action, reaction. The cause and effect law is divine, dynamic, and universal. So it's a different law. And there's, even though it has an action and reaction element to that, it has another element which we also participate. So it's very important that we start thinking about that, because I hear it often, and I'm sure you have as well, that we see somebody with a broken leg and we say, oh, this person broke somebody's leg in the previous life. For those of us who believe in reincarnation, and that's not an accurate reading, okay? So let's go into, and I have a, and that is a common knowledge. So we talk about karma, right? In the Bible, we have, by your words you're justified, and by your words you are condemned. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. So we have that action and reaction element multiple times referred to in the Gospel, in the Old Testament, and in a lot of other readings, right? So that's something we're familiar with. So let's see, how do you do this? Okay, in the book Action and Reaction from André Luiz, and for those that don't know André Luiz, a doctor that he passed, and he wrote a few books to the medium Francisco Xavier, explaining the life in the other world. One of his books is called Action and Reaction, which he goes into a place called Mansão Paz, and it is exactly studying what happens, after life and how people encounter and both the phenomenon of coming in with terms of what they did and also trying to prepare for new life. There is a particular mentor or enlightened being called Sanzio that comes to Mansão Paz. So he comes and he has a dialogue with André Luiz and his friend Hilario. And André Luiz, and André Luiz is so touched to see this person that's so enlightened, and he starts crying because he gets emotional when he sees him. And he says, I have so many questions. And Sanzio says, go ahead, ask me your questions, and I will try my best to explain it to you. So he explains, he asks the question, what is karma? What happens? You know, how this divine law operates with us. And he says, he talks about an accounting system, that each one of us will be accountable for credits and debits. So good deeds are going into the credits, bad deeds go into the debits. And he talks about a mechanism of accounting, that everything is taken into consideration. And that's not only applicable to an individual, but also to nations, to associations. So all that, what we are producing, will eventually return. He said that our conscience retains every pleasant and unpleasant experience in our memories and will help create our future. He also talks about, so then, and then in that conversation, then Luis starts saying, so, but what is good? Because you're saying the good and the bad, and he says, what is good? He says, good is the cooperation with the law. Good is that the choices that we make that benefit everybody, right? And bad is that exaggerated focus on the self. So it's selfishness, vanity, pride, everything that comes from that. Selfishness, vanity, pride, everything that keeps us in the lower zones on the spiritual development, right? And then in explaining that, he talks about Jesus being our moral compass. So if we want a good reference, let's look at Jesus, the same thing that's written on the Spirit's book. Hello, Aline. Hello, Neide, Samantha. Hello, everybody. I see a lot of people joining. So is that clear so far? So that's the conversation with Sanzio explaining the law of cause and effect. And that's a very beautiful conversation. For those who have the book, I encourage you to read it. So here we have a little cartoon just to represent the laws of cause and effect. So we have laws. We have laws in nature. And in Spiritism, in the Spirit's book, we have the natural law. What is the natural law? That every time we live in harmony with the laws of God, we're happy. When we deviate from the law, we suffer. So it's not necessarily a punishment when we suffer. It just tells us that we're not in accordance with the law. And here's a little example of somebody. Electricity has its laws. When we use it properly, we can have heat, we can have light. And when we don't, we can get a shock, we can get hurt. And it is about understanding that law and those mechanisms, right? We know that the law of cause and effect is not that mechanical. We know it is divine and it is dynamic, and we constantly operate with it. So things are in motion, and we can change that motion by our will, by our effort, and how we operate. So moving on, so there's and so Sanzio explains the law of cause and effect. He talks about the accounting system, and he tells us that we're all accountable for what we do. And at some point, Luis asks, but wait a minute, how does that work between our free will and our determinism? And now let's all think together, because if we believe that we did a number of things, therefore a number of things are going to happen to us, does it mean that we do nothing? Does it mean that we just sit here and wait because there's nothing we can do? What do you guys think? So he explains, no. We have a lot of things to our advantage. We have reason, we have willpower, we have knowledge, and we have judgment that play a very important role in how we relate to our responsibilities. Our behavior and conduct represent the liberation or aggravation towards the law. So we do play a very important part. So two things that we want to talk about today, that's one of them. That we have control. Just because we are now experiencing the results of our past, it doesn't mean that we can't change how things are in the future by changing the today. And Samantha is saying perhaps we can still repair wrongdoings. Absolutely we can. Absolutely. And then he talks about God's infinite love that shines through every process, because we have this thinking about punishment. We're going to get, no, it's just a rehabilitation. Look at the word. We want a rehabilitation. It's like life is going to give us a little push here, a little push there, so we get into the right path. we should adjust to life. And I highlighted a few words here in blue, adjust to life, because we spend a lot of time fighting life. I don't like my job. I don't like my family. I don't like my country. Everything around me is wrong. If everything was the way I wanted, then I would be happy. And we project a lot of that around. But life was created perfectly for our development. So we have to adjust to life, making the best use of those resources. And he talks about something very important here. He talks about our conditioned reflexes. And later on in this talk, we're going to talk about our habits. So over time, we build reflexes. And I'm sure you experience that, because I experience that all the time. We tend to make the same mistakes over and over. I am now taking Spanish classes, and I'm doing that through a software. And there's a particular verb that every time, and I think I learn it, and then boom, I make the same mistake over. I'm like, oh no, I made it again. You know, the thing gets red and said, Mom, it leaves on me. But we tend, and some of our things get conditioned. And we have to be very, very careful and pay attention so we can change those things. So it's easy to make the same mistakes, and they manifest in forms of temptations. That's why we say that in Spiritism, we don't have the promotion of past lives and what we've done, because we have just enough material and content here to know exactly where we need to improve. We know. We know the answers right now, because they are in those conditioned reflexes that we are in our habits. They speak up for the areas that we need to work on. And we should use our knowledge with our work and our effort towards our evolution, right? So this is a very important thing to look into, that even though this law exists and the law is just, we have the power today, with our choices, with our reason, will, knowledge, and judgment, to choose every day how we want our lives to be. Okay? Then in the Spirit's book, the word punishment, and that's another word that I don't like, because it gives me the impression that there's an external force dictating something to us, which is not true. He says, is a stick that leads the soul to turn inwards through its affliction in order to return to the path of salvation. The objective of punishment is no other than the rehabilitation and redemption. Again, rehabilitation. It's not about how you will pay for it. You did this, now you're gonna. No, it's not about paying for it. It's about learning from it. And sometimes we all have had experiences like that. And I'm sure that if we think about, specifically episodes in lives, and we see famous people like Steve Jobs saying, I was fired, but that was the best thing that happened to me, because that was a bad thing in the moment. But as I looked internally, I was able to, learn something from it. That's the intent. It is to say, well, that's an uncomfortable situation. I don't like it, but what is it trying to tell me? Is there something in my behavior, in the way I deal with people, in the way I deal with myself, in the way I deal with my life, that I should think about? That is the invitation. It's just like a bell that rings to say, you've got to pay attention to something, right? And here I put a picture of the pastor with a sheep that's just trying to get them on the path, and sometimes it's going to hit one or another and go get them. And there's a passage from Nicodemus, where in the book from Umberto de Campos, The Good News, and he tells about this passage where Nicodemus goes and asks Jesus about what is the path, and Jesus said, nobody's going to go to heaven without being born and reborn. And that conversation, Umberto de Campos tells us the rest of it, where two of the disciples asked Jesus to say, and Jesus starts explaining the law of cause and effect and the law of reincarnation. And they get very sad, right? Like we do. They said, well, but then Earth is always going to be a place of suffering, because today you have somebody who was murdered, and then next time you have a murderer, then you have this person gets murdered again, and then this gets. So as we get paying for things, and as this law takes place, the suffering is eternal. And Jesus said, no, you don't understand. That's not the point. It's not about one person being killed and the other being the killer. It's about two brothers walking towards evolution and love. And God is a loving Father. So whenever you find forgiveness and love, you don't need to have the suffering. That's another thing that we still need to get in from our past and from, years and years in society telling us that there's this punishment and there's this thing. Not necessarily. Okay? So, Marina, hello. I'm seeing a lot of friends from Amsterdam here. That's great. And in this conversation with Sensio, he says something very, very nice. He says that every life belongings, every talent, every ability, whether it's our time, our intelligence, our wealth, our health, everything belongs to God. These are resources that are borrowed, that we borrow for the purpose of our development, and we will be accountable to that. Just like in the parables of the talents, what have we done with our time? What have we done with all the knowledge, with all the time that we had, with the friends that we had, with the people that we could influence? What have we created for the purpose of our self-development, right? And he says that we're constantly transforming energy. He explains in the book that our thoughts, our words, and our actions are extremely powerful. And we can use that to create our own destiny, right? Each minute is important to redeem, to purify, and to renew ourselves. So we should focus on the now. We can change the past, but we can do something right now that is better than or different than we did before, and we can create a better future. That is the encouragement that we get from this, right? It's not that we say, oh my God, I did something and I shouldn't have done it, and then now what? No, let's, today we can do something else. We don't need to be like we were in the past. Oi, Birassi, hello. And now we're gonna move on from action and reaction to a different book, which is Heaven and Hell. This is the fourth book of the codification. After the Gospel and before the Genesis, which Kardec only talks about the afterlife. And he has two chapters and two parts of the book. First, he says, do we live, do we die? Is there life after death or not? And then he talks about what would that be like? And he compares with all the different religions and theories and all of that. And the second part of the book is all about spirits that talk about how they experience the afterlife. They talk about happy spirits that were okay, others that were really regretting the life choices that they make, and so forth. So they have a number of them in this book. And I like very much this cover here that's smaller. And I remember that's the one that my mom used to read at home. And I love that cover because the cover is a very good representation of the book, which says that heaven and hell are within us. It's not an external place. It's how the choices is a representation of the choices that we make in life and how we can make our life as peaceful and harmonious as we can, or we can make it a very turbulent, chaotic place. So let's talk about, in that book, he has a particular chapter that talks about the penal code of the future life. So he tries to summarize what he learned, and there are 32 pieces to that, right? And he says, what is the conclusion that we can derive from all the things that we have heard and all the explanations that we have heard? I think, first of all, no spirit in that book talked about having a tribunal or a jury. We expect that there was going to be a jury, said you go there and you go there. There's nothing like that. They were all experiencing the outcome of what they did. And they said, well, I wish I had better used my time. I wish I had done it. But it was all about their reflection with their own conscience. That's number one. And here's I just picked a few for us to talk about, but I really strongly suggest that we all read it because it's a very good reading. The soul or spirit suffers in the spiritual life the consequences of the imperfections that could not correct while in this life. Number two, full happiness is related to perfection. In other words, the complete purification of the spirit. So we're not going to be fully happy until we reach the point that we have overcome our own imperfections, because every time we err, we suffer. Again, It's in the Spirit's book. Every time we deviate from the law, we suffer. And that will be part of our development path. Number 7, every fault is a debt that it must be settled. So there is a divine justice for all of us. Number 8, the consequence varies according to the severity of the fault. So there's a relationship between what we do and the consequence that we trigger. The law of progress provides every soul the opportunity to acquire the good that it lacks. It's almost like life is designed in a way that will help us confront ourselves with the areas that we need to improve and give us the opportunity to go to a better path, right? So this is kind of nice. And then he says, regret, although the first step towards regeneration, is not into itself sufficient. It's necessary penitence and compensation. And I created a little story here just to explain what that would be like. So let's say we have little John. Little John is a very active kid, and he has a ball he takes to his grandmother's house, and he breaks her vase. And he doesn't think anything of it. He thinks it's funny, you know. His mother gets mad at him and say, you know, you shouldn't have done that. You have to apologize. But he doesn't really see what he's done. He said, go to your room, have a thought about this and all of that. And with time, he starts to see that he hears his mom talking to his grandmother, and he learns that that vase was a gift, was the last gift from her late husband, his grandfather. And it was something that she attached a huge emotional value to. And she was really hurt, and he saw that she cried. He felt really bad. He said, you know what, I shouldn't have done that. That was ridiculous of me. I love my grandmother. She's a good lady. She always, you know, does everything for me. She's there for me. She loves me very much. And I broke her heart, and I feel bad. He goes and he apologizes to his grandmother. He feels bad about it. She forgives him. She's fine. But he doesn't feel good. He's like, you know what? That wasn't cool. I hurt somebody who didn't deserve it. I did something that wasn't nice, and I don't feel good about that. And he keeps thinking about it. And his mom has an idea. She said, look, if you feel really bad about this, there's a money that I'm giving you every week when you do your chores that you've been saving to buy the nice video game. What if we put that money on the side? Instead of buying the video game, you're going to buy a new gift for your grandmother, something that she really wants. Would that make you feel good? He's like, yes, mom, that would make me feel good. It's something that she really, really likes. I would love to do that. So then he goes, and that's what we recall the repenting, and he goes and he saves the money. So he's without the video game, making extra chores so he can save the money, and then he gives it to the grandmother. And, oops. I'm having a problem with this. But you guys got the point. The grandmother is happy. I don't know how to do this now. Let's see. Okay, there you go. So you saw the reparation. So what we're trying to show here is that by having the, you know, the little John here is a representation of what we go through. We come into a place that a lot of things we're doing, we're not even knowing. But we come into places as we develop that we will get in touch with our conscience, say, I understand now that I could have acted differently. I understand now that I had a huge impact in other people's lives. You know, and that's the time to think about it. But just feeling bad is not sufficient. Just apologizing. Little John had to do something for his grandmother to feel good. And that's here and you can see here, you know, he's playing with his grandmother. He's happy, and he feels that he repaired what he did. So God is just, and life allows us to repair things in different ways. It's not like the eye for an eye thing that we think of mechanically, but always gives us the opportunity to do good where we did bad. I hope this is clear. And I think here, Samantha, what Samantha mentioned in the comments, it's very true. We can avoid or mitigate the future consequence of a fault by undoing it in the present. The longer we take to repair, the more painful it will become. and the more severe it will be, because it will take more force from life to put us in the path. So remember, we need to adjust to life. If we go with the flow and you see, oops, a signal here, let me adjust. Oops, a signal there, let me adjust. The less we fight and we resist, the easier it will be. Here we have two examples, but I will talk about it quickly. Is Zacchaeus, right, is in the Bible that he was a publican or a tax collector. So tax collectors were known for being corrupt, right? They collected taxes, but they also kept some of the money. He was, of course, somebody that everybody judged. And he was on a tree to look at Jesus. And Jesus said, Zacchaeus, come down from the tree because I'll have dinner at your house. And he was like, me? You, Jesus, talking to me? But he had something that was important. He was self-aware, and he immediately said, if I have hurt anybody, I will pay them 4 times more than what I've taken. He was ready to admit who he was. He was ready to see, and he was ready to change. That's the important piece, because we all have problems. We all have our Zacchaeus parts of us. But is that willingness to recognize where we our shortcomings and be willing to change. The faster we're willing to change, the less we need to suffer, because the suffering is only going to play a part to make us see something. And if the faster we want to see, the less we need to suffer. And the same thing with Saul of Tarsus, right? That he was in the road to Damascus, seeing everybody running away from Rome in orders that he had set. And at that point, he said, oh my God, I'm such a bad person. I'm going to sit here and cry. No, he said, look, if I have destroyed hundreds of lives, I'm going to save thousands. And he went on and he did. The amount of good he did was way bigger than any of the bad he's done. And that's what we need to think about. So then here is in the penal code of the future life. In number 32 parts. So number 33, Kardec makes the summary. And he makes only 3 points. Said, look, everything I've said to you, you can summarize in 3 points. Suffering is a condition of our imperfection. So the point where we need to look, even though we always like to look outside and blame, somebody else and the government and the job and the spouse, and suffering is always a condition of our imperfection. There's something here we need to look into. Number 2, all our imperfections and misdeeds find the appropriate and necessary adjustment in our own natural inevitable consequences. So we all are going to find, life is going to present to us the opportunity to adjust, right? Not punish, adjust. And number 3, we have the power of freeing ourselves from our imperfections with our will. All human beings, therefore, can avoid the sufferings and the consequence of those imperfections, the future happiness. So to ensure our future happiness. So we have our will. So remember, our will plays a very important point. And then he talks about to each one according to his deeds, right? So that is the kind of the summary of the whole piece of the moral code of the future life, right? The penal code. Now, why is it so hard, right? We know, we study, we understand, we all know what is good and what is that. Why is it so hard? So Sun Tzu explains that in action and reaction, and we see it often, that is our habits. There are those conditioned reflexes that we talked about before. Things that we do and we don't even know what we do. Bad thoughts that we think and we don't even know that we're thinking them. So there's a book called Thought and Life by Emmanuel. Then he talks about the habit, and he said is the set of accumulated mental reflexes constantly operating. So we have this vicious circle that sometimes we don't even know that is creating our lives, and we don't know we're doing it. And it's really, and he says in the domain of our ignorance, and the evolution calls for the development of a new conduct in order to replace those inferior methods. And he talks about the platform that Jesus introduced to us of transformation. So here, important tools, self-knowledge, first of all, because if we don't know ourselves, we have blind spots. And blind spots is when others know more about ourselves than we do. So it's important that we have the self-knowledge, that we have the moments that we think, that we listen to what people are telling us, that we have courageous conversations with our friends and loved us to say, tell me really, how's this coming across? How do you perceive this? And we can reflect, not for the purpose of judging and hurting, because we all have things, but we in Spiritism says that we need to be indulgent to our each other's faults, but it's just for our learning, for our self-knowledge. Second, the will to change. It's something that we hear often. I always been like that. This is the way I am. Well, this is the way you are now. We are all here to change. Why be fighting life if we can be working with life, right? And discipline, effort. Spirits talk about the hard work, right? Discipline and effort, so we can keep it. And our moral conduct, to always be reevaluating how we're doing and saying, well, if somebody else was doing that, would I applaud this, or would I say that that's not nice, right? So this is the things for us to think about. Cynthia is saying, remembering that we receive what we need first to be able to receive what we want. Yes, life is just, life is fair. And Aline says, do we have more predisposition to make the same mistakes from the past? Absolutely, absolutely. These are the conditioned reflexes, right? So we get, and we see that. I think if anybody that does a sport, that you study something, don't you tend to make the same mistakes over and over? It's because it's there, and we need to pay attention to them, to say, that's where I usually do. If we tend to procrastinate, that's a tendency we have. If we tend to, whatever tendencies we see is what we need to pay attention to. Okay? And then the power of the thoughts, right? In action and reaction, they talk about that. Our thoughts is a wave faster than the speed of light and acts as a dynamus, generating creative force. So we're very, very powerful in our thoughts, and we need to be careful with what we think. So nothing ever works for me, life is hard, then life will be hard. What are we thinking? What are we projecting every day? It is important, right? Because that will determine what we're calling and what we're associating ourselves with. It's the radio station that Vanderlei talked about last week, right? We have a radio that's always on. What are we going to be tuning in with? And we need to pay attention, because sometimes things become a habit of complaining. I like complain, and maybe situations change and I continue complaining because I'm in the habit of complaining. I need to remember that and say, let's pay attention, right? And to summarize the types of suffering, right? In the action and reaction, this explains the forms of pain. There's evolution pain is a good pain. In evolution pain is that the pain that when you work out really hard and then you wake up and your muscles are feeling something, but you feel good because you did something that you wanted to do and you're training for something. That is the evolution pain. It's outside in, and it leads us to the project. It's the pain of studying very hard for a test, and then you're exhausted and you're tired, but you feel good because you feel the progress coming from it. You feel that you're becoming a better person in that, right? That's the good pain. The other pains are not good. Remorse pain, just feeling bad, right? And that affliction, that torment. Anger pain, fighting life, being upset about everything else and blaming all on others. That is the pain that doesn't stimulate any progress. That's not good pain. So we need to think about what pain is that right now, right? We want a good pain. We want a pain of overcoming ourselves. We want a pain of progress. And boy, Chris, hello, Chris. Oh, nice to see a lot of friends from Amsterdam today. How nice. And then to summarize, the law of cause and effect is divine, dynamic, and universal. Life presents all necessary conditions towards our evolution. Everything that happens to us is fair, deserved, and necessary. It's not to punish us. It needs to happen because that's what we need in order to progress. Regret alone is not sufficient. It is required the atonement and redemption. Remember little John, right? We also need to go and get something to grandma so we can feel good, so we can feel that we repaired. The first step towards redemption is humility. Yielding to the will of God is the moment we stop fighting life and we say, thy will be done. Our habits and inflexibility increase our suffering. The more we fight life, the more we'll suffer and delay our progress, which is even worse. Self-knowledge and continuous work towards our progress are key to overcome the weaknesses and the way to reach our free conscience. And there's no true happiness without the approval of our conscience. So until we have cleared all those doubts, and until we are in complete harmony with the laws of God, we're not going to find that peaceful happiness and joy. But we're on the good plan here, the good path, because we're trying, because we're studying, because we're coming together, and we're all willing. And that is very good. So I hope you feel as inspired as I do when I read these things, because I feel comforted. I feel that there's a path forward. I feel that we're not here to suffer. We're just here to learn. And we can every day make choices that make our lives easier and happier. And to quote Francisco Xavier, none of us can go back and have a new ending, a new beginning, but we can start now and have a different ending. So I hope that brings you some clarity and some understanding. I don't know if we have time for any questions or if anybody wants to comment on anything, but that's our talk for today. Do we have more predispositions to make the same mistakes from the past? Aline, I think we talked about that, absolutely, and that's where we need to pay attention to. That's a very good point. Cynthia, remember that we receive that we need first to be able to receive what we want. Yes, yes, is what we need, not we want. So Spartaco, who was a beautiful man from Brazil, that from Batuira, he would say, I am having the life that I asked God from. And he would always say that with a smile, to say, maybe it's not the life that I appreciate the most, but for certainly the life that I need. Yes. Thank you back. Thank you back for being here, Lini. Miss you guys. Let me stop sharing the screen. Absolutely, we can repair wrongdoings. Samantha, very good. I hope that that's clear, right? We have beautiful examples. And if we think of Paul, the Soul of Tarsus, if you think of people that really have changed their lives, right? There's a nice biography from Elton John. And you can see in the movie that he completely changed his life, right? And he helped a lot of people. So he went from trying to kill himself to really having a redeemed life. And these are the beautiful examples that we need to follow. Cynthia says we need to be humble and accept the fact that we are imperfect. I believe when we accept the journey is less painful. Absolutely. You know, we spend a lot of energy fighting life and being upset at life and cursing life. And once we accept that this is the life that we have, life becomes a lot easier, right? Marina, saudades, miss you too. Good to see you here. Oh. Hi, Chris. It's going to be recorded for those who came in late. You can watch it later. Birassi, nice to see a lot of friends from Amsterdam here today. So I think we don't. If you don't have any more questions or comments, we can close here. I think it's nice to see everybody. Thank you for the opportunity of talking about this, because it makes me happy to be able to talk about the laws of cause and effect. First, that we don't become so, particular about, oh, this happened and this must happen, eye for an eye thing. It's not like that. It's all for the purpose of our development, of our growth, right? It's like we do with our children, you know, it's not a punishment to make them suffer, it's to make them learn, right? And if the kid is really stubborn and really doesn't want to, then we have to be a little bit tougher, but hopefully not, is what Cynthia just said. If we don't fight life very much, and if we understand, the sooner we do, the happier we will be, because that's the point, right? To live in harmony with the laws of God so we can all be happy. Neji, thanks back, Neji. Okay, so I think we're going to close for today then. Wonderful seeing all of you. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.